On July 3, 2025, during a campaign rally in South Carolina, former U.S. President and 2026 Republican presidential candidate Donald J. Trump made a statement that quickly echoed across the nation. While criticizing Hollywood elites, Trump declared Oprah should be grateful to be rich while being black. A lot of people would love to be in her shoes, but all she does is complain about America. The remark, delivered to a crowd that responded with applause and laughter, was captured by dozens of cameras and broadcast live on social media and news channels. The response was immediate. Within hours, the clip went viral, sparking outrage among activists, scholars, journalists, and everyday citizens. The statement not only reignited national discussions on structural racism in America, but also cast renewed scrutiny on Trump's political rhetoric and its influence on racial polarization, known for her strategic silence in times of controversy. Oprah Winfrey chose to respond in a reserved yet firm tone through a statement on her official website. Being rich and being black are not mutually exclusive, and I certainly don't owe gratitude to anyone who questions my dignity based on the color of my skin. Too many. Her response was not combative, but dignified. Oprah, who has built a public image around balance, compassion, and personal resilience, refrained from turning the episode into a direct clash with Trump. Instead, she used it as an affirmation of identity and principle, but behind the former president's statement lies a web of deeper issues. This investigative series will go beyond the surface of the controversy. It will explore the roots of such rhetoric, its social consequences, and what it reveals about the persistence of racism within American power structures. We will examine how Trump's comment strikes historical nerves, not simply because it targeted a successful black woman, but because it revives a rhetoric that equates financial success with the denial of racial inequality. In the following chapters, we will explore Oprah's journey and how she became a symbol of black achievement in America, Trump's history of controversial statements on race, the reaction to the comment across black and white communities, the political implications of the episode, and a deeper discussion on what it truly means to be grateful while navigating systemic inequality. This story is not just about one phrase. It is about the broader social reality. It exposes a reality that continues to place visible and invisible obstacles in the lives of millions of African Americans. To understand the depth of the controversy sparked by Trump's comment, one must first understand who Oprah Winfrey is, not just as a public figure, but as a cultural icon. Her life story is widely known. Born into poverty in rural Mississippi in 1954, raised by a single mother, sexually abused as a child, and later rising through sheer determination to become one of the most influential media moguls in the world, Oprah's journey from hardship to billionaire status has often been cited as a prime example of the American dream. But for many in the black community, Oprah represents more than success. She is a living contradiction of a society that simultaneously celebrates and resents black excellence. She has been praised for creating space for black voices in mainstream media, for speaking openly about trauma, and for fostering a culture of emotional healing on a global scale. Yet this very visibility has also made her a lightning rod for criticism, especially when she uses her platform to address racial injustice. Trump's remark, framed as a critique of complaining, reflects a broader discomfort that exists in certain political circles. Whenever successful black individuals speak out on systemic issues, the underlying implication is that wealth should neutralize one's awareness of racism, or worse, that financial success delegitimizes any claim to racial bias or discrimination. But this belief misrepresents both the lived reality of black Americans and the nature of racism itself. Structural racism, by definition, operates independently of personal income or fame. It exists in institutional practices, cultural narratives, and historical legacies. Oprah, despite her fortune, has spoken candidly about moments when she was denied entry to luxury stores abroad, or treated dismissively in professional settings, not because she lacked money, but because she was not immediately recognized as someone important. These experiences are not isolated. Data shows that black Americans, even at higher income levels, continue to face discrimination in areas ranging from real estate to healthcare. A 2023 Pew Research Center study found that 56% of affluent black Americans reported experiencing racial profiling within the past year, a number nearly identical to that of lower-income black respondents. So when Oprah speaks on race, she does so not only from personal experience, but from an understanding that wealth does not insulate her from prejudice. It often highlights it. Trump's statement, intentionally or not, disregards this nuance. It suggests that once economic success is achieved, the conversation about race should cease. But this perspective fails to recognize that representation at the top often comes with increased scrutiny. unrealistic expectations, and unique forms of racial pressure. In the context of Trump's long-standing critiques of media figures, celebrities, and what he terms the liberal elite, Oprah becomes an especially potent target. She is Black, female, wealthy, and influential, an intersection of identities that challenges traditional hierarchies of power. And for some, that alone is enough to incite resentment, disguised as political commentary as we move forward in this investigation. It is essential to continue unpacking how America responds when Black excellence speaks out. Is success a shield, a spotlight, or a burden? Donald J. Trump is no stranger to controversy, particularly when it comes to matters of race. His public record over the years reveals a pattern of statements and decisions that have raised questions about his views on race, privilege, and identity in America. The comment about Oprah being grateful to be rich while being Black is not an isolated incident. It fits within a larger narrative arc that has accompanied his rise in politics. To understand the full weight of his most recent remark, it is important to revisit previous moments that shaped the perception of Trump's racial views to 1989, the Central Park Five. Long before his political career, Trump paid for full-page ads in major New York newspapers calling for the death penalty for 5 Black and Latino teenagers accused of assaulting a white woman in Central Park years later. The men were exonerated by DNA evidence, but Trump never issued an apology. Instead, he doubled down, insisting they were probably still guilty. 2011. The birther movement. Trump played a leading role in promoting the conspiracy theory that President Barack Obama was not born in the United States. Though widely debunked, the movement gained traction among certain voter bases and was perceived by many as racially motivated. 2017, Charlottesville. After a violent white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, Trump infamously stated that there were very fine people on both sides. The comment drew sharp criticism from across the political spectrum and was seen as an unwillingness to directly condemn racism and hate groups. 2020, George Floyd protests. During nationwide demonstrations following the murder of George Floyd, Trump responded by emphasizing law and order and threatened to deploy military forces. His administration's clearing of peaceful protesters near the White House for a photo op further exacerbated tensions. Consistent language patterns, phrases like low IQ, rat-infested, or ungrateful have frequently appeared in Trump's criticisms of Black public figures. While each comment might be explained away individually, their accumulation paints a troubling picture for many observers. Trump's defenders argue that he speaks bluntly and applies the same aggressive rhetoric to all critics, regardless of race. Indeed, he has made inflammatory remarks about many white opponents as well. But the frequency and context in which his harshest comments target Black individuals, especially women, raise concerns about a deeper bias, intentional or not. The framing of Oprah's wealth as something she should be grateful for suggests an underlying belief that success for Black Americans is conditional, an exception, not a norm, and therefore something to be thankful for, not expected. This viewpoint, whether consciously held or strategically deployed, echoes a historical tendency in American discourse to position Black success as a favor granted rather than a right earned. It is not merely the words themselves, but the historical resonance they carry that makes Trump's comments so charged. For centuries, Black Americans have been told to be grateful for freedom, for civil rights, for any space allowed within systems built to exclude them. That lingering expectation of gratitude is precisely what many find offensive about Trump's framing. In the political realm, such statements also serve a strategic function. They mobilize a certain segment of voters who feel alienated by discussions of race and privilege. By painting figures like Oprah as complainers, Trump positions himself as the voice of those who reject what they see as divisive identity politics. But, as we will explore next, these rhetorical strategies do more than rally supporters. They widen social divides, reinforce dangerous narratives, and shape how the nation discusses race, power, and legitimacy. Within hours of Trump's statement about Oprah, reactions surged across media platforms, newsrooms, and households. But the country did not respond with one voice. Instead, the reaction itself revealed a fractured national discourse, where even basic perceptions of racism are often filtered through political identity, media bubbles, and personal experience. On one side, civil rights leaders, journalists, and public intellectuals condemned the comment as emblematic of a deeper racial bias, one that reduces Black success to a conditional privilege rather than an earned right. Social media lit up with messages of support for Oprah, with many using the moment to highlight their own experiences of racial stereotyping. Regardless of their socioeconomic status, media outlets such as The Atlantic, The Washington Post, and CNN framed the remark within the context of Trump's long history of racially charged statements. Analysts pointed out the historical undertone of telling Black Americans to be grateful, noting that this rhetoric often serves to delegitimize legitimate critiques of systemic inequality. Conversely, conservative commentators and right-leaning media outlets interpreted the backlash as overblown. Hosts on networks like Fox News and influencers across platforms such as X, formerly Twitter, argued that Trump's words were a defense of American meritocracy, not an attack on Oprah's identity. Some insisted that the former president was simply calling out what they viewed as a pattern of celebrity elites playing victim, even after achieving wealth and status. Supporters of Trump praised his willingness to say what others won't, framing him as a truth-teller in an age of political correctness. The narrative here is that Oprah and other wealthy figures of color have become part of an out-of-touch elite that exploits racial discourse for social influence. But what this divide reveals is more than just differing opinions. It exposes an underlying national tension over who has the right to speak about race, and under what conditions. For many white Americans, especially those who feel economically or culturally displaced, the sight of wealthy Black individuals addressing racism appears contradictory. This sentiment is often unspoken but powerful. If someone like Oprah can achieve immense success, then systemic racism must not be real, or at least no longer relevant. This argument, however, ignores a fundamental truth. Individual success does not erase systemic barriers. In fact, those who achieve success from historically marginalized backgrounds often do so despite the system, not because it is fair. Oprah's story is extraordinary precisely because the odds were stacked against her. Her wealth doesn't cancel out her race. It coexists with it, and in many ways intensifies the scrutiny she faces. Polls conducted in the days following the incident confirmed the national divide. A CBS YouGov survey found that 67% of Democrats viewed Trump's comment as racist. Only 18% of Republicans agreed. Among independents, 41% found the statement inappropriate, but not necessarily racist. Across all groups, younger Americans under 35 were significantly more likely to view the remark as offensive than those over 55. These numbers underscore a broader generational and ideological gap, not just about Trump, but about how America understands race in the 21st century. The Oprah episode, then, is not just about two public figures in a media battle, it's a flashpoint in a culture struggling to define what racism looks like today. Is racism always overt, or can it be embedded in language, tone, and expectation? Can someone deny being racist while reinforcing racial hierarchies through suggestion? These are the uncomfortable questions now being asked across dinner tables, talk shows, and classrooms. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into the historical roots of these tensions, tracing the long legacy of demanding Black gratitude, and examining how that legacy still informs modern political rhetoric. Trump's statement, "Oprah should be grateful to be rich while being Black," may have sounded spontaneous or offhanded to some, but to historians and cultural critics, it echoed a familiar refrain, one with deep roots in America's racial past. The expectation that Black people should express gratitude for any degree of opportunity, access, or advancement allowed within a system historically designed to exclude them. This concept, the burden of gratitude, has shaped American racial dynamics for centuries. During and after slavery, formerly enslaved people were often expected to show deference and appreciation to those who allowed them freedom, even when that freedom came without compensation, restitution, or full citizenship. The expectation was clear: freedom rights and dignity were conditional, and could be revoked if not sufficiently appreciated in the Reconstruction era. Many Black leaders who pursued education, land ownership, or political office were derided for forgetting their place. The notion of gratitude was wielded as a tool of control, a way to remind Black Americans that their status, however improved, was not permanent or fully theirs. It was borrowed, conditional, and revocable. This mindset persisted into the 20th century. In the Jim Crow South, Black professionals, doctors, teachers, lawyers, were routinely reminded through law and custom that their success could not shield them from racial subjugation. A successful Black business owner might be allowed to prosper, but never to criticize the system that kept others from doing the same. Fast forward to the Civil Rights era, figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and later Angela Davis were accused of being ungrateful for challenging the status quo, even as they sought basic civil rights. The sentiment, whether overt or implied, was that Black Americans should be thankful for the progress already made, and quiet about the progress still lacking. This historic pressure to be grateful, rather than assertive, continues to linger in public discourse. Oprah, as one of the most visible Black figures in the world, embodies a dilemma that many successful Black Americans face. The more visible and wealthy they become, the more they're expected to demonstrate humility and gratitude, not just as individuals but as representatives of their race. That expectation itself is not neutral. It suggests that success for Black Americans is a gift rather than a right, a departure from the norm. Rather than a rightful outcome of effort and talent, it implies that their status is contingent on remaining palatable, apolitical, and above all, silent about the systems that continue to disadvantage millions of others. By framing Oprah's wealth as something she should be grateful for, Trump's comment evokes this legacy. It recasts her accomplishments not as earned, but as granted and therefore conditional. Such framing doesn't simply minimize her individual efforts, it reinforces a collective message. Speak softly, be thankful, and don't challenge the system that allowed your rise. This is particularly ironic given that white Americans in positions of power are rarely, if ever, told to be grateful for their wealth. Their success is assumed to be deserved, the result of hard work or ambition, not something that requires a display of gratitude to the nation or its institutions. In this way, Trump's comment is not just about Oprah, it is a reflection of a larger dynamic in which Black excellence is always seen through a lens of conditional legitimacy, accepted, but only under the right terms. As we continue this investigation, the next chapter will explore how this dynamic plays out, not just in media and politics, but also in corporate America, sports, and education, areas where Black achievement is both celebrated and scrutinized. While the controversy surrounding Trump and Oprah has unfolded in the public eye, the underlying dynamics it exposed are not limited to celebrities or politicians. The tension between recognition and restriction, between success and the demand for silence, is a pattern experienced by many Black Americans across industries, especially in high-visibility roles. In corporate America, for example, studies consistently show that Black professionals face a phenomenon known as performance overcompensation. This refers to the unspoken expectation that they must exceed the standards applied to their white counterparts in order to be perceived as equally competent. When they do succeed, their presence is often treated as symbolic, celebrated for optics, but constrained when it comes to influence. A 2024 report by the Center for Workplace Equity revealed that 78% of Black executives in Fortune 500 companies reported feeling pressure to downplay their racial identity in professional settings. Many described avoiding conversations about race, inequality, or personal experiences. With discrimination for fear of being labeled divisive or ungrateful, this mirrors the narrative surrounding Oprah. Her platform has long included discussions about race, trauma, and resilience. Yet when she speaks about systemic issues, her critics frequently pivot to her wealth as if it disqualifies her perspective. The implication is that financial success cancels lived experience, a logic rarely applied to white leaders or entrepreneurs. The sports world offers another example. Athletes such as Serena Williams, Colin Kaepernick, LeBron James, and Naomi Osaka have all, at various points, faced backlash for speaking about racism. While their talent is celebrated, their activism is often met with calls to stick to sports. Like Oprah, they are told explicitly or indirectly that their success should silence their dissent in education. Black scholars and students often walk a similar tightrope. Those who earn academic honors or leadership roles frequently encounter skepticism about whether they are truly qualified, especially in institutions that have historically excluded people of color. This undermining of legitimacy feeds into the idea that excellence achieved by Black individuals is always conditional, validated only if it avoids challenging the norms of the majority culture. Across all these domains, the message remains: consistent Black achievement is accepted, even praised, as long as it does not demand systemic change. The moment it becomes critical, it is reframed as ingratitude or victimhood. This double standard is rooted in the myth of a post-racial America. According to this narrative, the success of figures like Oprah or Obama is evidence that racism is over, or at least no longer structurally relevant, but this interpretation is dangerously simplistic. It ignores the persistence of inequity and the reality that exceptional stories do not negate broader patterns of exclusion. The Trump-Oprah controversy acts as a cultural mirror, reflecting how far society has come in visibility, but how far it still has to go in equality. It forces the question: is the presence of Black excellence in elite spaces being used to mask or distract from continued injustice? In the next chapter, we'll explore how political actors, including Trump, have historically weaponized this narrative of gratitude as part of broader strategies to undermine racial justice movements and consolidate populist support. Donald Trump's comment about Oprah was not just a spontaneous gaffe, it was part of a broader pattern, one that political scientists and sociologists recognize as a deliberate communication strategy. Racial signaling to specific voter bases without overtly racist language. This tactic, known as dog whistling, allows politicians to activate racial resentment while maintaining plausible deniability. Historically, American politicians have used coded language to appeal to anxieties among certain segments of the electorate. In the post-civil rights era, outright racist language became politically toxic. But the sentiments behind them did not disappear. They simply became more subtle. Ronald Reagan, for example, used the term welfare queen to evoke images of lazy, undeserving black women abusing government systems, a myth that persisted for decades and shaped policy. George H.W. Bush's 1988 campaign famously used the Willie Horton ad to stoke fear around crime and implicitly link it to blackness. These weren't explicit racist messages, but the imagery and implications were unmistakable. Trump, unlike his predecessors, often walks a finer line, deploying both dog whistles and more direct provocations. By saying Oprah should be grateful, he frames her criticism of America as unpatriotic and entitled, echoing a common populist narrative that elites, especially black ones, are out of touch with the real, hardworking, and implicitly white American majority. This strategy has clear political utility. It reframes social justice concerns as personal grievances of wealthy minorities, downplaying systemic racism while reinforcing resentment among voters who feel ignored or displaced in today's economy and culture. Data from the 2020 and 2024 elections showed that Trump's strongest support often came from white voters without college degrees, a demographic that has in many regions experienced economic stagnation and growing political alienation. His messaging often resonated not by offering policy solutions, but by naming cultural villains seen as responsible for America's perceived decline: immigrants, urban elites, liberal academics, and increasingly prominent black voices who speak out on race within this framework. Oprah is not just a person, she becomes a symbol. Wealthy, black, liberal, powerful, and unafraid to speak everything that Trump's message positions as a threat to the traditional social order. This is not to say Trump's strategy is always calculated in the traditional sense. His communication style is impulsive, reactive, and often unscripted. But it is precisely this unpredictability that makes his messaging so effective. His statements often bypass conventional political filters and speak directly to emotion, identity, and grievance. Political strategists on both sides of the aisle recognize the impact. Some Republican operatives privately acknowledge that such comments keep Trump in the media spotlight, energize his base, and shift the national conversation in his favor even when the attention is negative. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders see these remarks as opportunities to highlight Trump's divisive rhetoric, but struggle with how to address them without further polarizing the public. The danger, of course, is that in normalizing these tactics, they become part of the political mainstream. Each offensive comment is followed by a media cycle, then fatigue, then forgetfulness, until the next one. Over time, the boundary of what is considered acceptable political speech continues to move. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this normalization of coded racial language affects younger generations and how it reshapes the national conversation around race, identity, and the future of democracy in an increasingly connected world. Moments like Trump's comment about Oprah are not confined to rallies or news broadcasts. They become viral touchpoints that reverberate across classrooms, college campuses, youth forums, and digital platforms. As the nation's cultural and political fault lines deepen, it is young Americans who are most affected by the messaging around race, power, and identity. A 2025 survey by the Institute for Civic Discourse found that 71% of Americans under 30 believe racism remains a very serious issue in the United States, a stark contrast to only 38% among those over 55. This generational divide has grown wider over the last decade, fueled in part by social media, online activism, and greater exposure to both progressive and reactionary narratives. Young people today consume political information in fundamentally different ways. Platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram allow for rapid, emotionally charged dissemination of both support and outrage. In the hours following Trump's Oprah remark, thousands of short-form videos were created dissecting the comment, offering historical context, or calling out what users labeled modern-day plantation logic. Hashtags like #GratefulToBeBlack and #Oprah deserves better trended among Gen Z users, not as blind celebrity support, but as expressions of solidarity against what many viewed as an attempt to reassert racial hierarchies through coded language. These responses weren't limited to Black youth. Young Americans across racial and ethnic groups engaged with the conversation, often emphasizing their rejection of old power structures and rhetorical manipulation. But this digital activism also comes with new risks. The same algorithms that amplify awareness also feed outrage. Extremist content, misinformation, and reactionary counternarratives often rise just as fast. Following the viral spread of Oprah's response, far-right influencers seized the moment to reinforce stereotypes about ungrateful elites, framing her statement as an insult to American values and those who worked hard without complaining. In this environment, young Americans are forced to navigate a complex matrix of voices, some rooted in historical truth, others in deliberate distortion. Educators, parents, and youth leaders find themselves in unfamiliar territory, struggling to equip students with the tools to think critically about the messaging they encounter daily. In elite universities, this conversation has taken a more academic form. Courses on race and media have seen enrollment spikes, while debates on free speech versus hate speech continue to divide campuses. Students demand not just safe spaces, but platforms to challenge historical narratives, question systemic bias, and define their own identities outside imposed frameworks. For young Black Americans in particular, the moment is both empowering and exhausting. On the one hand, digital platforms offer unprecedented reach, an ability to speak, organize, and lead. On the other, the pressure to constantly defend one's humanity in the face of powerful counter-messaging can take a psychological toll. Many describe a feeling of constant vigilance that every success must be explained, every opinion justified, and every emotional response measured. Mental health professionals have noted a sharp increase in what they term racialized fatigue among young Black Americans, a psychological stress resulting from prolonged exposure to systemic injustice, public invalidation, and the expectation to respond with grace. This generation is inheriting a democracy that is deeply polarized, and a media environment that is simultaneously liberating and destabilizing. The Oprah incident is a case study in how racial narratives are shaped, challenged, and contested in real time, not just by politicians and pundits, but by young people who are redefining what leadership and resistance look like as we approach. The final chapters of this investigation will turn to the long-term implications. What does this controversy tell us about America's future? Is there a path forward that reconciles success with justice, visibility with authenticity, and freedom with equality? As the dust begins to settle around Trump's remark and Oprah's measured response, the deeper question remains: what does this moment reveal about the American soul? At its core, the controversy is not about a single statement or even to public figures. It is about a country still wrestling with its identity, a nation where freedom and inequality coexist, where visibility does not guarantee safety, and where power can still be questioned on the basis of race. The incident exposes not only lingering racial tension, but also a widening cultural rift over how Americans define patriotism, success, and justice. For some, Oprah represents the pinnacle of what the American dream should look like. An individual who, despite systemic obstacles, rose to power through determination and talent. But for others, particularly those unwilling to acknowledge the persistence of racial inequality, she is a symbol of contradiction. A wealthy Black woman who dares to speak critically of the very system that made her rich. That contradiction, however, is based on a false premise. Speaking critically of a system does not mean rejecting it. It means engaging with it honestly. Oprah's life story, like those of many others, is both a triumph and a testimony. It is a reminder that progress is possible, and that continued progress demands truth-telling, even when uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Trump's strategy, whether deliberate or instinctual, highlights a broader trend in American politics: the weaponization of identity and resentment. By framing Oprah's social critique as ingratitude, he activates a particular emotional response in his supporters, a belief that real Americans are underappreciated, while perceived outsiders reap unearned rewards. This tactic divides not just along racial lines, but along class, regional, and educational lines as well. Yet, even amid this division, opportunities for reconciliation exist. Across the country, there are initiatives from civic education programs to interfaith dialogues, youth movements to corporate reform efforts, aimed at bridging understanding and fostering honest conversation. The Oprah moment has already prompted panel discussions, op-eds, and classroom debates. People are engaging, they are asking hard questions, but dialogue alone is not enough. Reconciliation requires more than conversation. It requires accountability, institutional change, and cultural humility. It requires a willingness, especially among those in power, to listen without defensiveness, to reflect without resentment, and to acknowledge histories that have too often been ignored. It also requires a reframing of success itself. Rather than treating Black excellence as an exception or a threat, society must learn to see it as a natural and essential part of its future. That shift will not come easily. It means challenging long-held narratives about race, merit, and belonging. In the end, the question is not whether Oprah should be grateful. The question is whether America is ready to be honest about its past, its present, and the complex realities of race and power that still define it. In our final chapter, we will offer a reflection on the road ahead, not just for Oprah or Trump, but for a country facing a reckoning. It can no longer delay. The clash between Donald Trump and Oprah Winfrey over a single phrase reveals a broader, enduring struggle in America's ongoing journey toward racial equity. It is a moment that calls for reflection not only on the words exchanged, but on the society that gives those words their power. For decades, progress toward racial justice has been uneven. Gains in civil rights, education, and economic opportunity have often been met with backlash, retrenchment, or denial. The narrative that Black success is exceptional or conditional has perpetuated a cycle of expectation and limitation, where individuals must prove their worth repeatedly while the system remains largely unchanged. Yet there is cause for cautious optimism. Oprah's resilience and willingness to respond with dignity, rather than division, sets an example for public discourse. It demonstrates that power need not be wielded as a weapon, but can serve as a platform for truth and inspiration. Looking forward, meaningful change depends on several key factors: education and awareness. Increasing public understanding of structural racism and its manifestations remains essential. This includes integrating honest historical accounts into curricula and promoting critical media literacy so citizens can navigate complex narratives. Political leadership, and commit to policies that address inequality. From criminal justice reform to economic inclusion and voting rights protections. Corporate responsibility. Businesses should recognize their role in advancing racial equity, not only through diversity initiatives, but by confronting systemic barriers embedded in hiring, promotion, and workplace culture. To community engagement, grassroots movements, civic organizations, and intergenerational dialogue are vital in fostering empathy and collective action. Bridging divides that seem insurmountable. Individual reflection. Each American has a role in examining their own biases, listening deeply to others' experiences, and advocating for justice within their spheres of influence. The road ahead will not be easy. It requires confronting uncomfortable truths and rejecting simplistic narratives that obscure the complexity of race in America. It demands persistence and patience as well as courage. The recent episode involving Trump and Oprah encapsulates the tensions of a nation grappling with identity, power, and belonging. But it also offers an opportunity, a chance to move beyond symbolic gestures and toward genuine transformation in embracing honesty, equity, and unity. America can honor the legacy of those who fought for freedom and open a new chapter where all its citizens are truly seen, heard, and valued. This investigative report hopes to contribute to that ongoing conversation, not by offering easy answers, but by illuminating the realities beneath the headlines, encouraging critical reflection, and inspiring a commitment to progress. If you found this investigation insightful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more in-depth reports like this. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. And please give this video a like to show your support. Your engagement helps us bring you more quality content. Thanks for watching.